Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Tim J. Leary Studios. It's the first Wednesday of June. Time for our first Wednesday art talk and art walk. If you're in town, I hope you'll come by and see what's going on in the gallery tonight. As usual, I start with my libation. It is 5 o'clock after all. And this is a very special one. It's a single malt Irish whiskey called Green Spot. And if you ever see it, give it a try. I've heard about it for years and I finally tried it and I was like, oh my God, it's so wonderful. So cheers to 5 o'clock and to the first Wednesday. So tonight I wanted to talk about about my work and where I'm going with it. As the summer approaches, things tend to be quieter in the desert. And so with that in mind, I will have more time in the back of the studio, although that isn't going to start for a few more weeks. I have a project that I have been commissioned to do that's coming up that I've been working on, and hope to complete in the next few weeks. Another project like this one, something similar, only 4 feet long, similar to that. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that, but I've just completed a big project, and so it feels really good to be kind of starting over. If you're around, you'll see that I've rearranged the studio a lot and changed my art out. But as I was thinking about this for tonight, what I was thinking about, where does that inspiration come from? And I've come to the conclusion that it's a chicken and the egg thing. We always talk about who are our influences, who are the influencers in historically in art that influences. But as I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing that I don't just come to that by accident. The ones that I am interested in do work that I resonate with. And so, I mean, I always say that the abstract expressionists, when I first noticed art in the early 60s, they were very well on their way to establishing their place in the art world and in art history. And they were the ones who were noticed enough to be written about. So that's probably the thing. So, you know, maybe I write about myself. So if somebody's written about, then they've got a place. So anyway, so what are those things and how do they come by? So the first thing that I realize is that I did some drawings last year, and I have a couple more, and that I'm going to show you. And this is where the chicken and egg thing comes in for me. Here's one, a small version of it, of a style. And I have another one that's a little larger, I think, in here. I put them in between the pages so that they're protected. Make sure that I've got them. I know it's here, honest, I know it's here. Here's the one of them that I was looking for. So you can look at this and you can say, Tim is copying Kandinsky. And I don't know if that's true. I mean, yeah, there's a similarity here, but this is the kind of work that Kandinsky did. Let's find a good example here. I guess this one here. That gets me most excited. He was thinking about music, and these are called compositions. I think this one is a composition. Yes, a composition. So think of symphonies. and that sort of thing. Some people have put these to music and videos. They're really quite wonderful. If you're on social media, you might run across one of those. But so that's part of it. However, and I love Kandinsky. I love that part of his work. I mean, he did other work earlier, also very nice and cool, but it doesn't get me nearly as excited as these. There's another one I wanted to pull out. I think it's in here. Can't find it, so we're gonna have to move on. So, even though I know it's in here. Where is it? Anyway, but so here it is. Aha. And this maybe illustrates more for me. Why am I interested in Kandinsky? What is it about Kandinsky's work that gets me excited? Well, I did this with drafting tools. When I was in high school, I started with architectural drafting, mechanical drawing and that sort of thing. I brought this book of Frank Lloyd Wright as an example of architecture. But so architecture. I'm interested in architecture. I spent a couple of years working in architects' offices as a junior draftsman. And I have to say, I loved working at the drawing board. And so when I started this series of drawings a year ago or so, I was enjoying remembering the drawing that I did on the drafting board in the architectural offices that I worked in. So it was, that was always a lot of fun. I wasn't a good enough student to subject myself to the kind of study I'd have to do in order to become an architect, in spite of the fact that I've studied my whole adult life. But so it's a chicken and egg thing, right? For me, as I'm thinking about it, I'm also interested in Paul Klee, and again, because his work has a little bit of an architectural feel to it. He's part of the Bauhaus. Kandinsky was a part of Bauhaus School, where they did, this is the one that's on the cover, where they were doing design. They were designing architecture, they were designing furniture, and the Bauhaus School was a very significant school back then, closed by the Nazis, which to me is a testament to how good they were. This is an artist who I was exposed to only a few years ago, who was a part of the Bauhaus School. And his work, you'll see if I stop flipping pages somewhere on something that's really fabulous, because there's so many things. There's so many, I'm going too fast. Saw his work in LA, and I was really excited by what I saw. But it's the same sort of thing. Here, well, we'll look at this one, and we'll look at the one that's on the cover. This one here, it's got a real design feel to it. Shapes drawn with straight edges. This one takes me to the next step for my work. But I was doing this work before I saw this, and that's where my chicken and egg thing is from. This is a couple of sheets of plexi, different things on each layer, physically layered through there. We have a peanut gallery. I'm going to show the book around. So I was very excited about that. Which came first, right? I'm very inspired by that work, but I'm inspired by that work.
Who is the artist?
Because it's Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, which doesn't look like how it's spelled. It has something to do with how I looked at, how I viewed the world visually. And so there is an architectural bent to it. But like I said, I guess I didn't care enough to go on to that. But I'm going to come back to those in a minute. But the other thing that got me excited was abstract expressionism, and there was an exhibit at Palm Springs Art Museum a few years ago of the women of abstract expressionism. They did not get their due back in the day. But let's see, who's this? This is Joan Mitchell. But their work was magnificent. And so I was lucky enough to get a copy of this book. This was a traveling exhibit that came to our museum here. And this, I think, like, shocking. Shocking, but also some similarities in structure to some of the other stuff we were just looking at. So that's some of that stuff. So what else do I want to tell you before I move on to the next thing? I came across this thing. I love Van Gogh, but I couldn't say that Van Gogh influenced my work, except that I could say that Van Gogh influenced my work because he did very heavy, he took a palette knife and put lots of paint on his canvases with his palette knife. And that was in the sunflowers and in various things, not in everything. But I was really excited about that idea. There's a little connection. And so I still have this old painting. I don't even know when I did this one. Well, let me see, 2006. And the reason I'm showing this is because for years I was putting things in my paint to build it up the way Van Gogh did. I wasn't doing it because I was trying to be like Van Gogh. I was doing it because I liked that effect and I wanted to see how it worked in my work. And I wanted to continue that idea of building up on the canvas, building up on the canvas. I do that in other ways now. But that was, I think, was an important step for me in that there. Now, one more little historical thing is something that I know I've mentioned in the past, but when the Japanese woodblock prints of the 19th century were discovered by European artists, here are some of them, they copied them. So famous artists like Vincent van Gogh made copies. So the one on the left in the Van Gogh, the smaller book, is the Japanese woodblock print, 19th century woodblock print. Here's Vincent van Gogh's same version, or his version, in oil on canvas. Exact same image. So would we say he was copying or was it derivative? Maybe. Does it matter? I'll let you answer that question. I had a coworker one time when I was working in visual merchandising who would create displays by copying fashion layouts in fashion magazines. He would create window displays. And they were slick and all that. Some people liked them. But I was troubled by that because they weren't original. They were not his own ideas. Even though he would have to modify things and make them work, they weren't his ideas, and it was always important to me that whatever I was doing was original. And so, do we care that Vincent van Gogh did that? Well, maybe Vincent van Gogh was exploring that. What he would have been exploring is perspective. And so, if you look at this one in particular, this is a good example. The way these images create perspective is through overlaying, and the textbook would say diminution of size. What a word. But what it means is this strip of land that's depicted in the back is really tiny. But these waves up here with the angry water, big. and bright so that they stand out. So it's a way of creating perspective. We're used to perspective in another way. And I know I've talked about David Hockney looking at perspective in a different way, and he was. But I came across something this morning as I was reading, and if I can read from you, Picasso was also working on understanding perspective in his work. And I was fascinated by this quote. I'm also fascinated by the fact that I came across this just this morning as I was getting ready to talk to you. So, the book, come on, In Montmartre, Picasso, Matisse, and the Birth of Modernist Art. Now, I must find the author's name so that I can give credit. Sue Rowe is the name of the writer, and she has a quote here. So Picasso and George Braque in Montmartre, around the beginning of the 20th century, maybe 1908 or 10 or something like that, or maybe over a period of time, are considered the creators of Cubist art. So for Picasso and Braque, what came to be called Cubism fundamentally depended on drastically different ways of thinking about perspective. Since studying the landscape of Lestat, Braque had abandoned traditional perspective, which now seemed to him too mechanical. It is very mechanical, I'll say. It has its origins in a single viewpoint and never gets away from it. A fixed viewpoint assumed that the eye of the viewer was still, whereas Cubism acknowledged that the eye moved constantly in the act of looking. How interesting is that? There's another little comment here about Picasso, if I can find it in here. Maybe not. But it basically was in talking about Picasso, saying that when Picasso painted Three Noses, and I love those paintings with three noses, if I can find a painting with three noses, or here, something like this. When he painted something like this, it wasn't that these eyes and the noses were all there. It was that he saw them from different angles, and he brought them all together into the painting. That one's pretty freaky. Like this one, for instance. What this writer is saying is that there's two noses. It doesn't mean that this woman had two noses or that he was just throwing in an extra nose just for fun. He was seeing different perspectives and bringing them all together, as did David Hockney more recently when he did works. If I can find, yeah, of course I'm trying too hard. David Hockney did a series of things where he would create the perspective by using several vantage points, and I know there's a great example in this book. I know it, honest. Well, like this one here. There are 6 huge canvases. They each come from a slightly different angle. He experimented with cameras on a truck, in a circle, and as he moved along and he took all these pictures simultaneously, he was able to see the perspective was not just one spot. And that's their complaint about that. Okay. All right. So, I haven't forgotten that I wanted to tell you about what, I have to remind you that Basquiat is still in my mind. Because he can be free in a way that I don't feel comfortable being free in his work. Okay, but so what's coming up for me then? So over these last several months have been really fun and exciting, and I've been doing a lot of work and creating these wonderful paintings. I'm really loving them, of This is a mountainscape, and I've done much larger, 5 feet wide versions of this sort of thing, which I love because I get to play with the colors and the lines and the shapes, and they have a harmony to them. Maybe Kandinsky would agree, even though he would have added more lines to that. So I made this canvas for that. So I'm going to do this sort of thing on here, just as an experiment. So that's one of the things that's coming up for me this summer. I also have, I'll just set this here. I have this thing that I started and then didn't get to finish. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but what's been catching my attention have been things like this beautiful piece of wood that was given to me, and these really interesting pieces of frames. And I'm wondering if something like that might just randomly appear somewhere on the canvas, or does this go here like that, or does it go like that, or perhaps come off, oh, I like that, come off the canvas. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to do. Like the building up I did with sand. Actually, we lived by the beach, so I would get sand from Ocean Beach, and I would use that sand to build up my paint. And that worked pretty well, because it stayed in the paint, it didn't flake, it didn't come off. But then I built up, so there's a question in my mind, as these pieces of assemblage work are, they are, how can I put it? Well, they're evolving, right? I love the sculptural thing, and I want to see if I can be more sculptural, if I can create more, like on this one here, if you can see this one, I built up a couple of levels. Well, what if I build up a couple more levels and make it more sculptural? And what do I do about that? Where does that go? Those are the questions that have floated around in my mind. That's such a good libation. So the other thing is that this is something I did last summer, this diptych here, these two tall pieces. I had a diptych on these stretchers that I liked okay. It was this. This was one of the pieces. It was okay. Not fantastic, but good, but okay. All right, I kept it since 2007 when I first did it. And if you look at this painting here, these pieces of canvas are taken from the original canvas of this painting. So I stripped the painting off of the stretchers, I re-stretched it, cut up the pieces, and then reassembled it. I find this to be much more interesting than this was. The next one that I've been meaning to do is this one. Same thing, it's okay, but this one, it's too dark. There's not enough variation in color. So stretchers are still really good. And I happen to have a piece of canvas just the right size to fit over that. So my plan is, and that was a plan from last year that I never got around to, strip that one off, re-stretch that new canvas onto there, cut up the old one and do something else with it and make another kind of art come out of that. So, so those are the things that are in my mind and coming up, that are on the, coming up in my, hopefully in my future. We'll see how far I get with that. And it doesn't matter how far I get, but what I'm hoping for with the summer is that the air conditioning keeps working, and that I'm able to have some time to play and explore I have a whole box of scraps of wood and all kinds of paints and stuff. And I want to play around with that. I have all these pieces of canvas and pieces of paper, and they can all go together and they can become new art. So I think that's the answer to the question. A little show-off thing for right now. I painted one of the benches. The city of Palm Springs avoided having to buy new city benches by creating this program, inviting artists to submit designs and to, looks like we're closing up on mine, to paint art on these benches. And they have now created a poster. And we had a little reception yesterday. And so there's the poster, the art benches of Palm Springs. And they're really cool. There's something like 70 of them around town. Really, really cool. So with that, lots of art going on in my life, and that couldn't be any better than that. So cheers. And please come and see us and click like. You have only a couple of seconds to do it, and let me know that you're here. And thanks for watching and